Shalom from Israel to all of the Daystar viewers around the world. I'm Moshe Bar Tzvi, the producer and founder of Israel Now News. We at Israel Now News are dedicated to bringing you the full story and the truth about Israel from Israel. It's written in the Holy Bible when David said in Psalm 25:5, "Lead me in your truth and teach me, for you are the God of my salvation. For you I wait all the day long." And God says in Zechariah 8:16, "These are the things that you shall do. Speak out the truth to one another. Judge with truth and judgment to peace in your gates. And always search for the truth, and the truth shall set you free." John 8:31. I hope you enjoyed the program. God bless you from Jerusalem. Shalom, shalom.
Welcome to Israel Now News. I'm Yochanan El-Rom.
And I'm Erin Viner.
In our top story, a shocking list of so-called achievements just published by the Fatah party of Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas includes the claim that its operatives have murdered 11,000 Israelis. Even though this figure was a gross exaggeration, the civilized world was stunned by its inclusion as one of the Palestinians' most treasured accomplishments on behalf of the Arab people. According to a report from the Palestinian Media Watch organization, not even one peace-seeking or coexistence-promoting effort was included in the list. Fatah began its murderous attacks in 1965, which is significant because that was 2 years before Israel liberated Judea, Samaria, and Gaza, the biblical Jewish heartland that the Palestinians want to seize for their future state. Since that time, a total of 2,554 people in Israel were murdered by Fatah and its Palestinian terrorist allies.
In 1957, Israeli leader Golda Meir said that peace will come when the Arabs love their children more than they hate us. And now, nearly 60 years later, the Palestinians continue to use their children as weapons in the war on Israel. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is appealing to the PA to stop encouraging parents who call for the deaths of their own children. The premier said that a video that was recently filmed by Palestinian activists shook him to the core of his very being, and that it showed within just a few seconds why the Israeli-Palestinian conflict persists. The clip shows an Arab man who is pushing his young son, waving a Palestinian flag, toward Israeli border police. One of the officers extended his hand and gave the boy a high five, but when the child started to return, his father started shouting at the Israelis to kill him, shoot him, apparently trying to claim the killing of another Palestinian innocent. A very carefully edited version of that incident, excluding the Israelis' friendly greeting, was broadcast on Palestinian TV. After viewing the original footage, Netanyahu said that this incident is not an isolated example. He asked that parents around the world join him in calling for an end of this kind of abuse against children.
The largest international Christian aid foundation has been exposed for funneling millions of dollars to the Hamas terrorist organization. The damning revelation has already resulted in Australia and Germany suspending financial assistance to World Vision. Other nations are expected to take the same action. The Palestinian director of the Christian Charities Gaza branch, Mohammed Halabi, was arrested in a joint operation by Israeli security forces following extended surveillance. He reportedly confessed to giving $7.2 million of Christian aid money to the Islamist terrorist group. Israeli officials said he admitted that Hamas ordered him to infiltrate World Vision about 11 years ago after he underwent organizational and military training. He steadily advanced until reaching the directorship in 2010, when he was able to transfer money, equipment, and aid packages to the Hamas terror group. Halabi allegedly set up a sophisticated mechanism involving false projects, siphoning off around 60% of the NGO's annual budget. Some of the money was used to dig terror tunnels into Israel and arm Islamist insurgents in the Sinai, while other funds paid the salaries of Hamas terrorists or was taken by senior operatives for their own personal wealth. About $80,000 is believed to have gone toward the building of a Hamas military base. World Vision is one of the largest humanitarian aid organizations in existence. Its primary source of support comes from the United Nations as well as Western governments. According to Halabi, humanitarian aid intended for residents of the Gaza Strip was given almost exclusively to Hamas terrorists, and it was rare that any assistance was given to those who had not sworn allegiance to the terror group.
Turning to Rio de Janeiro, where the International Olympic Committee finally held an official ceremony in memory of the 11 Israeli athletes who were murdered by Palestinian terrorists at the 1972 Games in Munich. The service included reading the Israelis' names and a minute of silence in their honor. The memorial took place at a mourning site erected at the Olympic Village 2 days ahead of the opening ceremony of the 2016 Games. Two widows of the murdered Israeli Olympians, Anki Spitzer and Ilana Romano, have long campaigned for official IOC acknowledgement of the Munich massacre. Both women attended the memorial in Brazil, where Romano said that their patience finally paid off in what was an extremely emotional and historic moment that they had waited for over the last 44 years. A moment of reflection in memory of the Israelis will also be held during this year's closing ceremony, and a service for the Munich 11 will be held at all future Olympic competitions.
Meanwhile, this year's Games have been marred by a series of anti-Semitic incidents. The Lebanese Olympic team refused to share transportation with Israelis, and the head of Lebanon's delegation actually prevented the Israeli team from boarding a bus to the opening ceremony by blocking the entrance with his body. The organizers then had to send another vehicle to transport the Jewish athletes to the event. The Lebanese delegation was cautioned not to repeat any such behavior in a warning that was likely directed at other teams from nations which refused to recognize Israel. This was apparently ignored by Saudi Arabia, however. Riyadh's judoka, Juad Fahmy, claimed she was injured and forfeited a match after fearing she would have to then compete against Israeli judoka Gili Cohen in the women's 52-kilo weight class. Many media outlets outraged their viewers by covering the claims of Palestinian swimmer Mary Atrash. She alleged that so-called Israeli occupiers denied her access to practice in a standard Olympic-sized pool. The Israeli Government Office for Coordinating Activities in the Administered Territories issued a statement that Atrash had refused to apply for a permit to train in Jerusalem, which was granted to other Palestinian athletes. Her allegations were later proven to be false by Israeli media, which exposed that the swimmer had access to several Olympic-sized pools near her hometown. Meanwhile, the Israel Olympic Committee sent a letter of protest to Facebook after its feature called Profile Frames of Competing Nations failed to place Israel and its flag in alphabetical order. Israel was listed at the end of Zimbabwe, and the banner of the country's Olympic Committee was posted instead of the national flag.
Here at home, the Israeli army is now seeing an impressive 400% increase in the number of female fighters. All Israelis are drafted into the army at the age of 18, with young women serving for 2 years of national service, which is about a year less than their male counterparts. Combat roles were first made available to young women in an all-female unit back in 2005, when some 435 volunteered. There was a dramatic surge when the Army inaugurated mixed-gender units, and the number of women combat soldiers is soon expected to surpass the 2,100 mark. So many young women still want to sign up that the IDF is now making plans for yet another co-ed battalion in the near future. Some of the female soldiers are so patriotic that they're even willing to dedicate an additional year of service to the state and serve the same amount of time as the men so that they can accept positions being offered for the first time in intelligence assessment, cyber operations, special operations, and anti-terrorism.
The Israeli army is also planning to open a special ultra-Orthodox Jewish paratrooper unit as part of overall efforts to more fully integrate the observant population into society. The first round of religious soldiers will join the platoon this coming November after undergoing a strenuous selection process. They will serve on an all-male military base, be provided with strictly kosher food, and also hold daily Bible studies. The Ministry of Defense has launched a recruitment campaign to attract volunteers and has been posting flyers about the unit throughout the ultra-Orthodox communities in Israel, as well as on social media. Officials are hoping to instill both pride in Israel and the IDF alongside pride in Torah study. They also seek to reassure the ultra-Orthodox that serving in the Army will not affect their pious lifestyles. About 3,200 young religious men are expected to be drafted this coming year.
Lift up your eyes and look around. All your children gather and come to you. Biblical prophecy is unfolding right before your very eyes. The people of Israel are returning to the Promised Land after 2,000 years of exile. But millions of Jews are still waiting to come home. Violent anti-Semitism threatens many of the Jews. We must rescue them before our window of opportunity slams shut. Bless Israel by supporting Keren HaYesod UIA, the official fundraising arm of the Jewish state. Together, we can help fulfill the prophecies of the Bible.
Let us bless Israel together.
To donate and get information, visit our website kh-uia.org.il.
That concludes the news portion of our show. Stay tuned for Ask the Source with Josh Reinstein.
Hello and welcome to Ask the Source. I'm your host Josh Reinstein, and we're here on a beautiful sunny day on our rooftop studio in Jerusalem. My guest today is former member of Knesset Yochanan Plesner. He's now the president of the Israeli Democracy Institute. Yochanan, thank you for being on the show.
Thank you, Josh.
Yochanan, tell our viewers a little about what is the Israeli Democracy Institute.
Well, the Israel Democracy Institute is Israel's premier think and do tank. We affect policy and legislation in Israel based on excellent applied research and try in this way to strengthen the foundations of Israeli democracy, to initiate legislation, reforms, to improve the way Israel is governed.
We have about 80% of our population that are Jewish, 18% Muslim, 2% Christian. How does that work? Does everyone's voice get heard in our democracy?
Well, of course, all Israeli citizens get to vote for the Knesset, both Jewish and Arab, Muslim, and all others. They all vote for the Knesset. We have representation for all different groups and sectors within the Knesset. And what we have is a system that is called proportional representation system, which means that a number of parties get together and decide who's going to be prime minister. The one who has the majority can actually form the government and lead the country.
One of the things that the IDI does is promote democracy, but you also work in other avenues. What are some of the other areas that you are working in today?
Well, we have two major sectors in Israeli society, both the ultra-Orthodox population and the Arab minority. We're working on creating better opportunities for integration into the workforce, social integration, into higher education. In addition, we also work very strongly to improve Israeli governance. That means that we want to initiate legislation and structural reforms to ensure that the political system is more stable, is more responsive to the Israeli people, that the government functions better, and that we will have a state that is clear of corruption. Those are the goals.
An interesting report was released by the IDI last month asking the question, would the majority of people be in favor of leaving Judea and Samaria, like we just saw a month or two ago with the Brexit? What was the results of that report?
Good question. First of all, the idea of a referendum is such that we think that by and large the elected officials should manage the affairs of state. But when it comes to major fundamental questions in the Israeli case, such as withdrawing from the West Bank, Judea and Samaria, we think that it makes sense for the entire population to affect and shape this decision. The outcome of the public opinion poll that we ran shows that Israelis, depending on how you ask a question, are pretty much split in the middle between wanting to withdraw from the West Bank, depending on not if there's an agreement, and those who think that the right thing is to stay and hold on to Judea and Samaria. The main consideration for Israelis is security around those questions. What will make the Israeli state, the Jewish state, more secure?
Over the last few months, even the leader of the opposition, Bougie Herzog, came out and said that there is no peace process, there is no peace partner, there is no real two-state solution today. Why is it still, though, the idea of the government, why is the government promoting a two-state solution?
Well, it's a good question. The motivation for Israel to consider withdrawal from the West Bank or separation of the state is twofold. First, we consider the question of security. What will make Israel more secure? Secondly, since Israel is a democracy and is a Jewish and democratic state, Jewish not in the religious sense, but Jewish also in the national sense. The Judaism means also a national identity, not only a religious identity. And for us to preserve Israel as a thriving, prosperous, vital Jewish and democratic state, many in Israel, including the Prime Minister, think that if we get the security goal sorted, it's better to secure a solid majority of a Jewish population, even if it means that we hold on to a smaller piece of territory.
Yochanan, there are literally tens of millions of people watching this show. What message do you have for our viewing audience?
Israel's democracy is important. Israel's democracy is important because the Jewish people are important, because we are at a very strategic part of the world where we provide an anchor of stability, a beacon of hope for the rest of the world, and we work from within to strengthen Israeli democracy and its institutions, and we constantly seek for partners to strengthen our democracy and to build new alliances, and we are open to that, and we will continue to fight for those goals. Thank you.
Thank you, Yochanan, for being on the show, and thank you for tuning in to Ask the Source. I'm your host, Josh Reinstein. Now back to the studio.
Up next, shining light from Israel.
When I did my graduate studies at the Middle East Institute at Columbia University's School of International Affairs, I took many courses on the question of the Middle East conflict. Semester after semester, we studied the Middle East conflict as if it was the most complex conflict in the world, when in fact, it is probably the easiest conflict in the world to explain. It may be the hardest to solve, but it is the easiest to explain. In a nutshell, it's this. One side wants the other side dead. Israel wants to exist as a Jewish state and to live in peace. Israel also recognizes the right of Palestinians to have their own state and to live in peace. The problem, however, is that most Palestinians and many other Muslims and Arabs do not recognize the right of the Jewish state of Israel to exist. This has been true since 1947, when the United Nations voted to divide the land called Palestine into a Jewish state and an Arab state. The Jews accepted the United Nations partition, but no Arab or any other Muslim country accepted it. When British rule ended on May 15, 1948, the armies of all the neighboring Arab states, Lebanon, Syria, Iraq, Transjordan, and Egypt, attacked the one-day-old state of Israel in order to destroy it. But to the world's surprise, the little Jewish state survived. Then it happened again. In 1967, the dictator of Egypt, Gamal Abdel Nasser, announced his plan, in his words, to destroy Israel. He placed Egyptian troops on Israel's border, and armies of surrounding Arab countries were also mobilized to attack. However, Israel preemptively attacked Egypt and Syria. Israel did not attack Jordan and begged Jordan's king not to join the war. But he did. And only because of that did Israel take control of Jordanian land, specifically the West Bank of the Jordan River. Shortly after the war, the Arab states went to Khartoum, Sudan, and announced their famous three no's: no recognition, no peace, and no negotiations. What was Israel supposed to do? Well, one thing Israel did a little more than a decade later in 1978 was to give the entire Sinai Peninsula, an area of land bigger than Israel itself and with oil, back to Egypt, because Egypt, under new leadership, signed a peace agreement with Israel. So Israel gave land for the promise of peace with Egypt, and it has always been willing to do the same thing with the Palestinians. All the Palestinians have ever had to do is recognize Israel as a Jewish state and promised to live in peace with it. But when Israel has proposed trading land for peace, as it did in 2000, when it agreed to give the Palestinians a sovereign state in more than 95% of the West Bank and all of Gaza, the Palestinian leadership rejected the offer and instead responded by sending waves of suicide terrorists into Israel. Meanwhile, Palestinian radio, television, and school curricula remain filled with glorification of terrorists, demonization of Jews, and the daily repeated message that Israel should cease to exist. So it's not hard to explain the Middle East dispute. One side wants the other dead. The motto of Hamas, the Palestinian rulers of Gaza, is, "We love death as much as the Jews love life." There are 22 Arab states in the world, stretching from the Atlantic Ocean to the Indian Ocean. There is one Jewish state in the world, and it is about the size of New Jersey. In fact, tiny El Salvador is larger than Israel. Finally, think about these two questions. If tomorrow Israel laid down its arms and announced, "We will fight no more," what would happen? And if the Arab countries around Israel laid down their arms and announced, "We will fight no more," what would happen? In the first case, there would be an immediate destruction of the state of Israel and mass murder of its Jewish population. In the second case, there would be peace the next day. As I said at the outset, it is a simple problem to describe. One side wants the other dead. And if it didn't, there would be peace. Please remember this. There has never been a state in the geographic area known as Palestine that was not Jewish. Israel is the third Jewish state to exist in that area. There was never an Arab state, never a Palestinian state, never a Muslim or any other state. That's the issue. Why can't the one Jewish state the size of El Salvador be allowed to exist? That is the Middle East problem. I'm Dennis Prager.
Please stay tuned for the ICEJ report from the International Christian Embassy, Jerusalem.
After the Jews were exiled from the land of Israel and dispersed among the nations, within them there remained a dream that by next year we will be in Jerusalem. And the term used for describing this return to Jerusalem is Aliyah.
In Hebrew tradition, whenever a person becomes closer to God, they make an aliyah. And so when someone comes to Israel and fulfills that dream, that prayer of to next year in Jerusalem, they are going up spiritually. It's not just immigrating, it's not just moving from place to place, it's fulfilling this commandment of next year in Jerusalem, of going up to be closer to where you're meant to be. The Ethiopian Jews have been extremely faithful under duress, under persecution, under harsh living conditions. Beyond that, the people that are living today still in Ethiopia represent a very complex reality. They all have family members living in Israel. So you have horrible circumstances of a brother here and a brother there. Sometimes it can be a mother here and some of her children there, or vice versa. Literally, families are torn apart that need to be made whole again. Aside from that, the conditions that they're living in Ethiopia are difficult as far as nutrition, as far as health. These are people that their faith and their desire to come to Israel uprooted them from their villages These are not people that are living their daily lives like generations before and praying to one day return to Jerusalem. These are people that already became Abrahams. These are people that left their villages and came to the city of Gondar and congregated together with this dream, with this vision, and are living there almost as refugees in their own country, struggling to survive. And we need to bring them.
My name is Oshra Friedman. I started my journey to Israel when I was 5. I'm doing my PhD at the Haifa University. I'm married, proud to be a mother for 3, and I'm Israeli citizen from Ethiopia, and I'm proud Jewish. Before we left Ethiopia to Israel, my 3 brothers did already Aliyah, immigrated to Israel. So they were already here waiting for us, even though we didn't have any connection with them. And my parents knew that this is the time. They got the sign that they're supposed to leave, and they just packed everything in one night and they walked. And we have been told to be quiet, and we walked with the parents. And lots of families, we were about 30 families, not all of them survived the way. We walked for 3 months. And for me, that experience of Operation Moses, it's a journey that opened doors for me, opportunities that me as a person and a woman and Ethiopian community can be a little bit something else. We can achieve a little bit more, and to learn how to live in a new country. In the eye of a child, I learned lots of things. I have been experienced a lot of things that I never had. That was the first time that I saw a plant, a truck, even a building, and also find out that not all the Jewish are black. That was also a surprise for me. So for me, that operation was a very significant moment that actually started my whole new life in Israel. From the first time that I went to study, I learned how much I don't know and I need more, and I have this hunger to study more and more and more. For me, it was amazing because I thought that now I can do things that maybe I didn't dream about, but I know I'm capable to do.
Make this dream of returning to Jerusalem become a reality for other Ethiopian Jews. Go to icej.org/aliyah to donate today.
That's all for this edition of Israel Now News. I'm Yochanan El-Rom.
And I'm Erin Viner, reporting from our studio in Jerusalem. Please join us again next week for all of your Israel updates.